Husband pushed me away at our wedding and said my pregnant sister would take my place. My next move: please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. Imagine standing at the altar on the most important day of your life. The church is full, flowers are everywhere, and every eye is on you. You're dressed in white, your heart is racing, and you're ready to say, "I do." But instead of hearing words of love, the man you trusted most suddenly pushes you away and says he cannot marry you. He points to your own sister, your pregnant sister, and declares she will take your place. In that moment, my world shattered. I was Rachel, the bride who thought she was about to start a new life with Andrew, the man I believed loved me. But instead of a kiss, I got betrayal in front of everyone I knew. My hands shook, my throat closed, and I felt like the ground was slipping beneath me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't believe that my own sister, Megan, stood there smirking, her hand resting on her stomach, proud of the child she carried. My child. No, Andrew's. The room went silent, broken only by the whispers spreading through the crowd. I saw shock on some faces, pity on others, but not a single person moved to defend me. My own family sat frozen. My mother lowered her eyes as if ashamed. My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. And then there was Andrew, standing tall and smug, acting as though this humiliation was his right. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the words died in my throat. I had dreamed of this day since I was a little girl. I imagined a lifetime with someone who would stand beside me, protect me, and love me. Instead, I was being replaced by the very person who shared my blood. I remember looking at Megan. The smirk on her lips told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was planned. She wanted what I had, and she got it. She wasn't just pregnant. She was proud of stealing my future, proud of standing where I was supposed to stand. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of them. My humiliation was already complete, but my pride wouldn't let me break down in that moment. My heart pounded as I turned away from the altar, the sound of murmurs following me like daggers to the back. Every step I took felt heavier, but I forced myself forward. That day, I lost more than a fiancé. I lost my sister. I lost trust. I lost the life I had planned. But deep inside, a small fire lit up, a fire that whispered this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. I ran out of the church with my veil slipping off and my shoes dragging against the ground. Every whisper felt like a stone thrown at me. I could hear people saying things behind my back, but I didn't stop. I only knew I had to get away. My heart was heavy, my body weak, and my mind couldn't catch up with what had just happened. When I reached outside, the cool air hit me, but it didn't calm me. My chest hurt as though someone had pressed a weight on it. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I wanted to disappear. All I could feel was shame, a deep shame that wrapped around me like chains. Andrew's family came out later, not to ask if I was all right, but to defend what he had done. His mother looked me straight in the eye and said, "Megan is carrying Andrew's child. That's his future." Her words cut like a knife. She didn't see me as a person anymore, just a problem standing in the way of the life they wanted. His father nodded in agreement, acting as though this was the right thing to do. I realized they had chosen their side long before today. Then came my parents. My father's face was red with anger. He looked ready to confront Andrew, but he held back. He clenched his fists, his body shaking, but he knew he couldn't change what had already been done. His silence said everything. He hated what happened, but he didn't know how to fight it. My mother was different. She didn't show anger. She showed blame. She pulled me aside and whispered, "You must have done something wrong. Men don't leave for no reason." Her words broke me in a way Andrew's betrayal hadn't. Instead of holding me, instead of protecting me, she placed the weight of this disaster on my shoulders. She believed I had somehow failed. My own mother thought I wasn't good enough to keep him. I felt completely alone. I had no safe place, no comforting arms, no one to remind me that I mattered. It wasn't just the end of my wedding. It was the collapse of everything I thought I could count on. Family, love, trust. All of it was slipping through my fingers. As people left the church, I stood on the steps, watching my life scatter in front of me like pieces of broken glass. Megan walked out with Andrew, her hand in his, her head held high. The sight made my stomach twist. She didn't look guilty. She looked proud, as though she had won something. I wanted to believe this pain would fade quickly, but deep inside I knew it would leave a scar. My world had been turned upside down in front of everyone, and there was no way to hide from it. I didn't just lose Andrew. I lost the belief that the people closest to me would protect me, and that loss hurt more than anything. When I finally returned to what was supposed to be my new home, I found my belongings already scattered outside. My clothes, my shoes, the boxes I had packed with care, all of it lay dumped on the porch like trash. The sight froze me where I stood. I hadn't even had the chance to call that house mine, and already I was being erased from it. Every item thrown out carried a memory of hope I once had, now turned into proof of how unwanted I was. I bent down to pick up a few things, my hands trembling, but the front door swung open before I could gather much. Megan walked out, her hand resting on her stomach, her face smug. She didn't say sorry. She didn't even try to look ashamed. Instead, she gave me a smile that stung worse than any slap. Behind her, I could see Andrew moving my furniture inside, arranging it as though it had always been meant for my bed, my table, my things. Everything I brought into this life with him was now hers. Megan brushed past me, her voice loud enough for me to hear. "He was never really yours, Rachel," she said with a laugh. "Andrew always wanted me. You were just the practice." Her words cut through me like glass. I stood frozen, clutching my belongings while she walked around the house as though she owned it. She wasn't just taking my fiancé. She was taking my place, my space, and the life I thought was mine to build. Andrew didn't stop her. He didn't even look at me. He moved around Megan as though I wasn't standing right there, as if I had been erased completely from his life in a single day. The man who once promised me forever acted like I was nothing more than a stranger at his doorstep. I heard them laughing inside, their voices carrying out the open window. Megan's sharp tone cut through the air as she mocked me again. She was never good enough. "I don't know how you lasted so long with her." Andrew chuckled in response, and the sound made my stomach twist. It wasn't enough that they betrayed me. They wanted me to hear how little I mattered to them. I couldn't stay. Every sound from that house reminded me of what I had lost. My heart ached, but I forced myself to pick up what I could carry and leave the rest behind. With each step away, I felt the weight of betrayal pressing deeper into me. My sister had turned against me, and the man I once trusted had joined her side. Blood and love, two things I thought would protect me, were now the very things that destroyed me. I walked away carrying not just my belongings, but a wound that went far deeper than anything I could hold in my hands. After leaving that house, I made a choice. I would not beg Andrew to take me back, and I would not fight Megan for what she had stolen. Both of them had shown me exactly who they were, and lowering myself to their level would only let them win. My heart was broken, but I still had my dignity, and I wasn't going to let them take that too. The first step was distance. I couldn't heal if I stayed in the same town where everyone knew what happened. Every corner held whispers. Every familiar face carried questions or pity. So I packed what little I had left and moved to a small town 2 hours away. It wasn't far, but it was enough for me to breathe again. Nobody there knew me as the bride who was left at the altar. I was simply Rachel, and for the first time in weeks, that felt like enough. I found a small job at a local cafe. It wasn't much, but it gave me something I desperately needed: purpose. The owner, a kind older woman named Claire, treated me with respect. She didn't ask about my past. She didn't pry into my wounds. She just saw me as a worker willing to give my best. Her kindness reminded me that not everyone wanted to tear me down. The customers, too, began to know me for who I was, not what I had lost. They greeted me with smiles, asked about my day, and thanked me for the smallest acts of service. Those simple exchanges built something in me I thought I had lost. Slowly, I began to feel human again, not just the shell left behind after betrayal. Every night when I returned to the small apartment I rented, I sat in silence. I let the quiet heal me brick by brick. I didn't cry as much anymore, but I didn't pretend everything was fine either. Instead, I let myself sit with the pain until it started to turn into something else: resolve. I realized I didn't want revenge in the form of shouting, fighting, or trying to ruin them. That would make me no different from. My revenge would be quieter, stronger, and lasting. I wanted to build a life so solid, so filled with respect and success, that one day Andrew and Megan would see me and realize what they threw away. They had mocked me for not being good enough. My answer to them would not be words, but the life I created. I wouldn't just survive, I would rise. For the first time since that awful day, I didn't feel weak. I felt steady, calm, and determined. They had pushed me out of their lives, but what they didn't know was that they had pushed me towards something better. Months passed, and the distance I had created gave me space to breathe. I kept my head down, focused on my work, and slowly built a routine that steadied me. But even far away, news of Andrew and Megan found its way to me. At first, I tried to block it out. I didn't want to hear about their life. Yet the whispers came, and with them came the truth I hadn't expected. I learned that Andrew wasn't the man he pretended to be. Behind the charm he showed my family, he was reckless. He had been gambling for years, hiding debts, and lying about where his money went. It turned out he wasn't the reliable provider Megan thought she had chosen. Instead, he was drowning in financial mess, and she had walked straight into it. The more I heard, the clearer the picture became. Megan, once so smug, was now tied to Andrew in ways she hadn't planned. Her pregnancy wasn't giving her security, it was giving him control. He used her condition to keep her quiet, reminding her she had no choice but to stay. The strong and proud sister who had stolen my place was now stuck in a life full of cracks. At first, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to pity her, because carrying a child while dealing with a man like Andrew couldn't have been easy. But then I remembered her smirk at my wedding, her words outside that house, the way she mocked me as if I was nothing. Pity quickly faded. This wasn't my burden anymore. This was the life she had chosen. For me, something shifted inside. I realized I didn't need to confront them, didn't need to stand in front of them and remind them of their betrayal. Life was already doing that for me. But still, I wanted my revenge, not the kind that screamed, but the kind that proved I was stronger without them. I decided that the best way to hurt them was to outgrow them completely. They had thrown me aside as though I wasn't worth anything. So my revenge would be building a life so steady, so fulfilling, that their choices would haunt them every time they thought of me. The cracks in their world were growing, but instead of looking back, I looked ahead. I took on more shifts at the cafe, learned skills from Claire, and began saving money. I started sketching designs again, something I had loved before everything fell apart. Little by little, I began shaping a future for myself. What Andrew and Megan didn't know was that while their house was collapsing, mine was being built brick by brick. My strength wasn't in fighting them, it was in showing that I never needed them at all. And one day, when they saw what I had become, regret would be the only thing left for me. Day by day, I poured myself into work. At first, it was just long hours at the cafe, but I knew deep inside I wanted more. I wanted something that belonged only to me, something no one could take away. I began sketching again in the evenings, filling notebooks with designs I had once dreamed of turning into real pieces. It was slow, quiet work, but it gave me a sense of control I had lost. With time, I saved enough to rent a small corner space on Main Street. It wasn't much, just one room with bare walls and old flooring, but it was mine. I cleaned it up, painted it bright, and set up a small studio for my design work. At first, I doubted anyone would notice, but little by little, people began to walk in. Some wanted custom clothing, others wanted small decor pieces. Word spread quietly, and soon I had steady clients. The money wasn't huge in the beginning, but it was honest and mine alone. I didn't depend on anyone, not my parents, not Andrew, not anyone else. Each dollar I earned carried pride. I had gone from being thrown out with my belongings to building something with my own hands. That thought kept me moving forward, even on the hardest days. The people in the town respected me. They saw my effort, they saw the late nights, and they supported me. I was no longer the girl who had been left behind. I was a woman running her own business. For the first time in my life, I felt admired not for who I was with, but for what I could do. That respect gave me strength that betrayal had once stolen from me. While I built my life, news of Andrew and Megan reached me through the same whispers that once hurt me. But now, instead of breaking me, those whispers fueled me. I learned that Andrew's gambling had only worsened. He owed money to people he couldn't repay, and his name was spoken with disgust rather than pride. Megan's pregnancy, the one she had flaunted to take my place, wasn't going smoothly either. Complications left her weak, and the stress of living with Andrew's reckless choices weighed on her. The picture of their life was nothing like the one they had tried to paint in front of me. It wasn't love and success, it was fear, debt, and regret. The same people who once looked at me with pity now looked at me differently. They saw the business I had built, the independence I carried, and they whispered not about my humiliation but about my strength. I didn't need to stand in front of Andrew or Megan to prove myself. Life was already showing the difference between us. While their world was falling apart, mine was rising brick by brick. And the envy in people's eyes told me everything. I had turned my pain into power, and no one could take that from me. One evening, just as I was closing my shop, I noticed a figure standing by the door. For a moment I thought it was another customer, but when he stepped into the light I froze. It was Andrew. He looked nothing like the man who once stood tall at the altar. His clothes were wrinkled, his face was pale, and his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. "Rachel," he said softly, almost like he was trying to remind me of who I used to be with him. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. I simply held the door open and waited. He stepped inside, looking around at the space I had built for myself. There was something almost bitter in his smile, as though he couldn't believe I had managed without him. After a moment of silence, he finally said, "I'm in some trouble. I need your help, just a loan to get me through." I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. His words were smooth, but his eyes told the truth. He wasn't here out of love, he was here out of desperation. I watched him carefully. A part of me wanted to laugh at the irony. The man who had thrown me aside for my own sister was now standing in front of me, begging for money. He tried to act concerned, asking how I'd been, pretending as though he cared. But I saw through it. This wasn't care. This was need. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I simply folded my arms and let the silence hang heavy between us. My lack of response seemed to rattle him more than any angry words could. Finally, he lowered his head and walked out, muttering something under his breath. A week later, it was Megan who came to my door. Her face looked tired, her eyes hollow. She wasn't dressed like the sister who once smirked at me in triumph. She looked worn down, her pride stripped away. She hesitated before speaking, her voice shaky. "Rachel, I don't know where else to go. Things aren't the way I thought they'd be. He's not the man I believed he was. Please, can you help me?" Hearing those words from her was surreal. The same sister who once mocked me for not being good enough was now standing at my door, begging for support. For a long moment, I just stood there staring at her. I remembered every word she had thrown at me, every look of satisfaction when she took my place. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us. My calm expression said more than words ever could. She shifted uncomfortably, waiting for something, anything, but I gave her nothing. That silence was my answer. I didn't need revenge through cruelty. I had already won. When Andrew came back a second time, I knew he was desperate. His shoulders sagged, and his words spilled faster, like he was trying to convince me before I could say no. He spoke about debts, about how people were pressuring him, about how Megan was struggling with the baby. He tried to make it sound like he cared for me again, slipping my name softly into his sentences, hoping it would stir old feeling. But I didn't flinch. I looked him straight in the eye and said quietly, "You made your choice that day. You replaced me with someone else. Now you can live with what came after." My voice wasn't raised, but it was steady. His face fell as though my words cut deeper than shouting ever could. He wanted pity, maybe even guilt, but he got none. Later, when Megan returned, I gave her the same answer. She stood in front of me, her eyes wide, her hands clutching each other tightly. She looked like someone who wanted to believe I was still the sister who once cared for her. But I wasn't that person anymore. She had broken something between us that couldn't be repaired. "You and Andrew chose each other over me," I told her, keeping my tone calm. "That was your decision, and now you'll have to carry it." Her lips parted as though she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. She lowered her head, her body stiff with the weight of my refusal. She had expected anger, maybe insults, maybe tears, but not this calm wall she couldn't climb. What they didn't understand was that silence and rejection cut deeper than any revenge I could have screamed in their faces. I wasn't wasting energy on hatred anymore. I had built my life, and I wasn't giving them a piece of it. The sting of my refusal was clear. Andrew's pride cracked when he realized I wouldn't save him. Megan's face told me she finally knew what it felt like to be left standing alone. The two of them, who once laughed at me, were now drowning together with no hand reaching out to pull them up. For me, there was no satisfaction in watching them suffer. The satisfaction came in knowing they finally saw the truth. They hadn't just lost me as a bride, as a sister. They had lost someone irreplaceable. They had chosen betrayal over loyalty, greed over love, and now the price was theirs to carry. I closed the door on both of them without raising my voice, without a single insult. That was the sweetest revenge, showing them that their betrayal no longer had power over. Time kept moving, and with it, so did I. My days were full of work, and my nights were filled with quiet peace I had earned for myself. I no longer thought about Andrew or Megan with anger. They were part of a story I had already closed. My focus was on the life I was building, and for a while, I thought that was enough. It was during one of those ordinary days at the shop that I first met Daniel. He came in looking for a custom gift for his sister. He wasn't rushed, he wasn't demanding. He simply asked if I could create something meaningful. The way he spoke carried patience, and the way he listened showed respect. It caught me off guard, because I wasn't used to a man treating me that way. At first, I kept my distance. I was polite, but I didn't let him in. I had been hurt too deeply before, and the thought of trusting again felt dangerous. But Daniel wasn't the kind to push. He came back every now and then, sometimes for small orders, sometimes just to say hello. Each time, he carried himself with quiet kindness that didn't feel forced. Slowly, I noticed little things. He remembered details from our conversations. He asked how my work was going, not because he wanted something, but because he cared. He respected boundaries, never making me feel small or unworthy. He didn't look at me as someone broken. He looked at me as someone strong, someone who had survived and built something out of nothing. One evening, after closing the shop, we sat outside on the bench near the street. The air was cool, and the town was quiet. Daniel told me about his own struggles, about the mistakes he had made, about the lessons he had learned. He didn't pretend to be perfect. He didn't try to impress me with empty promises. He was honest, and his honesty made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't a sudden change. Trust didn't come overnight, but with every passing week, I felt my walls lowering little by little. Daniel never asked for more than I was ready to give, and that patience meant everything. Where Andrew had seen me as something to replace, Daniel saw me as someone to cherish. For the first time since my world had been torn apart, I allowed myself to imagine love again. Not the fragile kind built on lies, but something steady, something real. With Daniel, there were no games, no betrayals, no pretending. Just two people choosing each other honestly. In him, I found not only a partner, but proof that my scars didn't make me less. They made me stronger. And finally, I felt ready to open my heart again. Looking back now, I see everything with clearer eyes. My husband-to-be pushed me away at the altar, and my own sister stepped into the place that was meant for me. That betrayal broke me in ways I can hardly describe. But today, I understand something I didn't back then. What felt like the end of my life was really the beginning of another. At first, I thought my story was about loss, losing love, losing family, losing the future I had planned. But in truth, it was about finding something far greater. Andrew and Megan thought they had won that day. They thought I was left with nothing. But what they really did was free me from a life that would have only brought me pain. They pushed me toward a path that made me stronger, wiser, and braver than I had ever been. I no longer see myself as the woman abandoned at her wedding. I see myself as the woman who stood back up, who rebuilt her life from ashes, who turned humiliation into strength. The revenge I once thought I needed didn't come from shouting or hurting them back. It came from proving, quietly and steadily, that I was worth far more than they ever believed. Andrew's choices caught up with him, and Megan's pride crumbled under the weight of her own actions. That was their story to live with. Mine was different. I built something real. I created a life with dignity, independence, and respect. And most importantly, I learned that love, when it comes from the right person, doesn't demand you to shrink. It allows you to grow. If I had married Andrew, I would have lived in his shadow, carrying his lies, holding his burden. If I had clung to Megan as a sister, I would have tied myself to someone who valued envy over loyalty. Losing them hurt, but keeping them would have destroyed me. In the end, walking away wasn't a tragedy. It was my salvation. I once thought revenge meant making them suffer the way they made me suffer. But now I know revenge was never about. It was about me. It was about showing myself that I could stand, that I could succeed, and that I could love again without fear. So when I think of that day at the altar, I don't see the end anymore. I see the turning point. My life didn't stop there. It began there. The pain I carried became the fuel that pushed me forward. And the woman I am now is someone they can never touch, never break, and never replace. I walk into my new life with dignity, with love, and with peace. Whatever misery Andrew and Megan live in now belongs only to them. My story has moved past them, and I finally feel free.